Everyone, we have Chad Dyar on the podcast today. So Chad, thanks so much for joining us. He is the Director of Sales Enablement and Strategy at Hearsay Systems. Super involved in the community, has one of the most fascinating backgrounds I've ever heard of in this space. So Chad, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So before we jump into it, give us a little bit about your background. I said it's super unique, but kind of walk us through a little bit of your professional career and how you got into the wonderful world of enablement.
Sure. I'm from small town South Carolina, and I actually grew up as a musician. I grew up singing in church, and then I actually went to college and graduate school to study performance. So I was a theater guy and a music guy, and I spent the first more than a decade of my career as a professional opera singer. And I took a little break from opera as I was in my early 30s, and I took a sales job on my mom's recommendation. She had actually been in the dental hygienist role and then changed over to sales when my sister and I were in college and had found a lot of success. And she said, "Hey, I think this would really work well with your personality. You can make some money. It's a good thing to do while you're figuring out what your next step is." And it turned out to be my next step. I loved it. I really enjoyed my inside sales time. I had incredible managers and coaches early in my career, and it got me really excited about what I could do. And since then, I've just been taking turns all around the table in the revenue department. I sold, I was a sales manager, I've done sales operations, I've worked in renewals, and I've been in enablement, which I feel like is my forever home inside of the revenue organization. Enablement resonated with me the most. I feel like it uses my skills the best. It helps me like align my passion with what I do every day, and it makes me more excited about the work that I do than anything else I've ever done in my career, probably including music.
That's awesome. That's such a great journey to, especially having that sales experience and then moving into enablement. And not many people that I interview were opera singers. So that's super fascinating. And we'll jump into a few more questions about your career, but I want to start with this question at the kind of top of the conversation because it's so unique. So you had 2 heart attacks before you were 40. So tell us a little bit more about that, how that kind of changed your perception on the world, on your career. Give us the kind of skinny on that amazing story.
Yeah, in my early 30s, I woke up in the middle of the night thinking I was having an ulcer or some type of like gastric situation, drove myself to the hospital. When I got there, I collapsed, and when I came to, there was a priest standing over me giving me my last rites, telling me I had blockages of all 3 major arteries, and took me immediately back to surgery, and literally had a surgery that day, had to wait a couple of days to heal up so I could have another surgery. And then the next year, my medication was off. I had a stroke. A couple of years later, I had a second heart attack. So there was a period in my life in my mid-30s where it was just, I was in the hospital. I was constantly in the hospital, and it took me out of my life. It took me away from my music. It took me away from sales. And on the other side of that, I became a really different person. And I think the biggest thing it changed was it really taught me discipline, because the things I did before then, the way that I ate, the way that I exercised, and I was a healthy guy. I mean, as a stage performer, I was on my feet. I had to dance. I had to move. I was in the gym every day. I was training, but I didn't balance it all the right way. And I learned to be disciplined. I went through cardiac rehab twice. I work with a nutritionist closely, and I've changed my life in a pretty intense way ever since then. And the great thing is, last week I met with my cardiologist, who I see every 3 months and have for 10 years. And they said, "You're the healthiest heart patient we have right now. You're a Cinderella story when it comes to turning your health around." And they pushed my next appointment out for a year. And for somebody who's had, done blood work and been stuck by needles every 3 months for a decade, it's a pretty intense win for me. But bringing it back to what I do day to day, it really made me open about who I am, how I live, and I go for it a lot harder than a lot of people that I work with. A lot of people feel like they're holding back in their life, and I don't have those restraints on me anymore. I feel like I've already living on borrowed time since I went through all that before. So I live hard. I love hard. I work hard to be as good as I can be at what I do. And I think a lot of that comes from overcoming something as tough as, 2 heart attacks and a stroke in your mid-30s.
That's such an amazing story. And you could just tell, just talking to you right now, where you have such high energy, and from a professional standpoint in enablement roles, I bet you that serves you extremely well too. So thanks for sharing that story with the audience. It was so amazing when I read about it, and congrats on that clean bill of health.
Thank you.
Let's shift gears a little bit too. So you get this clean bill of health. You're also starting this new role at Hearsay. You're about 6 months in, and you wrote a really great blog post about looking for that dream job and looking for that right fit. Tell us a little bit more about that experience of finding the perfect role for yourself and what advice you might give to others in finding that perfect role.
Sure. I think a lot of people just play the game wrong nowadays. And I have a lot of friends in different places who've been looking to make a change. And I've learned a lot through going through it. Now I'm coaching a lot of people on how to get through it as well. Because a lot of people just throw a couple of bullets in a resume, paper the whole town with it, and think that's going to get them to their next step. But I did it exactly the opposite way. I went through and looked at every job that was available for enablement. I figured out what some of the bullets in those job descriptions were that appealed to me. And then I rewrote my resume and my LinkedIn so that I could apply for those jobs and meet all the criteria if they made sense for me. And then before I clicked apply to anything, I reached out to people at all those companies and said, hey, do you have a referral program? Do you want to refer somebody? Do you want to refer me? So I got warm introductions to the hiring managers. I had a resume that aligned really well with what the job description was. And then I had as many people as I know write recommendations on LinkedIn so it would tell a compelling story. And the great thing is I had a ton of opportunities. I ended up interviewing with 15 different companies and going down the path that way, which almost seems like reverse engineering the hiring process, gave me really great options. And I got to choose a company that I really felt was in alignment with not only my skill set, but also what I want out of my life and my career. If you look at our company values, one of them is Kaizen. I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, so Kaizen is my full-on philosophy in life and my mantra. And then customer focused, 100% customer focused. But the funny one was GSD or GRSD, get the right stuff done, which I had T-shirts back at my last company made for my whole team that said GSD because that was our motto, just to get the stuff done. So I felt like I aligned with the company values really well, and those two things put me into a position to come in and hit the ground running, which is what I've done.
That's awesome. I love that GSD story. That's actually at my previous company. GSD was one of the cultural values, but I like GRSD even better. So on the topic of GRSD, so you have a really cool background in the sense that you've run sales ops and you've run sales enablement. And I think what we see a lot in the community is how do you match the metrics with that GRSD, right? And so getting stuff done or the right stuff done. So how has your approach changed because you've run kind of both of these departments? Because a lot of our audience, they have only done enablement. They don't understand the ops side or the metric side as well. Give us some best practices around that.
Well, I mean, my philosophy is programs without quantitative metrics can't grow. If it just feels good when you do it, you're just going to be the kitchen sink function because you take on work other people don't want to do. And when you take on that work, your project, you have a lot of projects that you do, and you may create some value in how people feel about the work that you do, which enablement is kind of the touchy-feely part of sales. Operations is very straightforward. It's like commissions and forecasting and numbers, and here's what we're doing, and here are the outcomes. And I took a lot of that side of my brain and that type of work that I did before and applied that to what I'm doing in enablement to figure out what are the metrics that I can chase for the projects that I'm building in enablement. And I look at things like coaching. If you're building a coaching program and people are adapting to it, you can not only measure manager performance and rep performance, you can measure enablement's performance as we put that program together. Is it the right structure? Are people committing to the right behaviors? And then what outcomes is that driving? And that's what enablement owns, not just the managers doing the thing and the AEs receiving the thing or the SDRs receiving thing, but the structure that fits around it and how the program evolves over time. And I think similarly for content, there's a lot of pain with marketing and sales of I need this now. Well, I made that last week. Well, I want something different. And having someone, an enablement role own that and be able to not only help generate some of that content from our expertise in enablement, but also be great partners with marketing so that we can make sure we're leveraging the right content at the right time and asking them for the right things, then making them accessible to salespeople, and then tracking the analytics of, oh, salespeople are using that and it's helping us close deals. More of that, please. And then even things like onboarding. I mean, we talk about ramp time, but onboarding and training, they should be heavily metric driven. It shouldn't just be I graduated and checked the box. It's here are the things I learned, here are the behaviors that I've adapted to, and here are the results of those behaviors over time, and then revisit that with those core competencies in sales over time to make sure that people are developing through their career. So everything that I do, I feel like is super metrics driven. I know I just hit like the 3 major enablement categories, but I feel like those are the ones that are resonating most with the enablement leaders these days.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that metrics-driven approach that you have, especially because of your background. And so let's switch gears just slightly too. And this is really around team building. I know when I was reading a few of your previous posts, you talk a lot about people, processes, and platforms. And I want to focus on the people portion of this. You've built multiple teams in your past jobs, building a team out at Hearsay. tell us, give us your best practices around recruiting, around what type of people you recruit, and how do you motivate them when you're building out an enablement and even strategy function.
Yeah, I think most people that know me know I'm like a people person, and I care a lot about the people I work with. So I'm really thoughtful about creating those types of teams. Diversity and inclusion, first and foremost, in a lot of different ways. You want a lot of different types of people on the team that come from different backgrounds. At this Sales Enablement soiree recently, that was one of the things that we talked about in my panel session. And they were asking, who do you hire first? How do you build the team out? And because I was a sales guy with a sales background and know how to build great relationships with salespeople, my first two hires in my last role were both marketing ops people, people that really understand the marketing function, the content strategy, had chops in Marketo. So as we brought the marketing tech stack into with the sales tech stack to create the enablement stack, that I had expertise on the team and had buy-in. And then I was able to add value to both of their lives because one of them was interested in project management. So I got to roll some other projects over to her. And then the other guy was interested in becoming more of a classic enablement leader. He wanted to speak more, train more. So I was able to develop their skill sets, but I already had buy-in from the marketing people because they were family to marketing, just like I was family to sales. And I did the same thing with analytics and BI. I found someone that was really into the data sets, who worked closely with Tableau and SQL, our Snowflake instance, brought them onto the team to help us generate all of our analytics for all of our enablement projects. And then I also reached into the learning team and found someone who was a classical trainer and brought them into the enablement training position. So I look to find people from different backgrounds who are experts in their space that create that sense of diversity. And then the fun part is the mad science experiment you play when you get there, which is combining their skill sets when you put them together on projects, because they're really different. And they have different skills, but they're open and they want to learn. So watching what happens when you put the analytic person next to the trainer and like figuring out what those metrics are going to look like from those trainings. And I feel like that's what helped the team not only gel as a unit, but also grow. And then the other piece is having a strong development plan is important. I will say easily my favorite part of my job is always developing people. I'm super passionate about enablement and everything I can do there. But I feel like you're never really going to be able to grow and get to the next level unless all the people around you are growing and learning too and able to successfully take things off your plate as you're evolving in your career. So I spent a lot of time in the last couple of years putting together my development plan. I have a blog on LinkedIn that takes you through the 10 questions I ask. But I really want to figure out what people want, what motivates them, what they think about their current role, what they like and don't like about it, and then their hopes and dreams for the future. And it takes people in a lot of interesting directions. The people that I've worked with in the past, some of them are still in enablement. Some of them are like way off the reservation doing something completely different because that's what their passion was. And they got permission in working with me and my team, they got permission to really explore those avenues and figure out how to bring that passion back into their day-to-day work. Because as a performer, I bring a lot of my performing tendencies or my stage work to my day-to-day. I mean, I do it when I'm performing. I'm not performing when I'm training, but it is a little bit of a performance. But when I get up to speak to people or the things that I have to do day to day, even in meetings, I have to bring a certain level of energy and I have to connect to people and connect to the room in a certain way. And I bring all of that stuff into my role. And I want to find out what that is for other people and help them feel really comfortable bringing their best self and the things that make them weird and wonderful and unique into the role so that we can have an authentic team and understand what drives each other and push each other to be better every day.
Yeah, I love that because at times enablement can become a narrow career path. So it is, and there's people that can rise to the top and become VPs of enablement, reporting to CROs, but a lot of people don't make it there. So what's that path into another part of your professional career? So I love that you put that together for your team members. So one thing that's really critical, and actually this is actually probably part of your career development plan personally, is that you built such an awesome brand for yourself. You've written 2 books. You're always posting thought leadership articles or questionnaires on LinkedIn. So give us some tips about how do you perceive building your personal brand? What's important? What are some best practices? Give us the lowdown there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is discipline. You have to define your passion. Like, what are you going to write about? What are you going to do? What are you going to focus on? And right now for me, that's enablement. It hasn't always been. So if you dig back into the deep articles that I've written maybe 6 or 7 years ago on LinkedIn, when I first got started really building my brand out, I was a sales manager and I was figuring out how to run a sales team and what worked. And it was a lot about motivation and understanding how to get the right performance out of salespeople. And through the years, as I changed roles and really evolved what my brand is and what I'm passionate about and landing on enablement, it's really finding that focus and sticking with it. If you look at what I write about, it's all in the same really tight space. And if you want to know what my brand is, I can tell you exactly what it is because I've honed it down. Like, I focus on being inspirational because I feel like we need that, especially, you know, in the environment of the world today. You need inspiration. A big part of it is empathy because I'm super curious about other people and want to know what they do and what makes them excited. My favorite part of building my brand is the interaction I've got to have with people at different levels. And as I've kind of upgraded my brand through the years, through gaining a larger audience and getting speaking and writing opportunities, I've gotten to interact with people at higher levels, you know, CEOs like yourself or authors of books that I love that I've got to read through the last couple of years. And being able to exchange ideas with them and be able to share my ideas and get some real feedback has been incredibly helpful. But you have to do the work. You have to do the discipline at the front end. And my commitment is an hour a day. I'm reading, I'm writing, I'm doing a couple of activities that are consistent. And what happens is when you get into that discipline, my book wrote itself. I was just journaling every day and suddenly I saw themes and said, wow, what if I put a frame around this? And suddenly there's the first book and then there's the next book and there's the next book. And now it's become really easy to access all those ideas because I journal every day. So those ideas are there. If you want to say, hey, Chad, what do you think about onboarding? What's a good thing? I got a deck for you. I've got a couple of days of journal notes that are just my thoughts on how that works. And that's anything that I talk about, speak about, write about. I have access to all those ideas that I keep on a file on my computer because I'm putting stuff together every day. So there's never like a crunch moment where you're like, hey, can you do a thing? And I'm like, I have nothing prepared for that. I've read, you know, I try to read up to 50 books a year. So I have ideas that are inspiring me at all times. I try to write at least 2 pages worth of information a day, which is, you know, between 500 and 1,000 words. And sometimes it's my grocery list and my workout schedule, and it's me cheating just to write something on paper to say I did it because I'm human. And some days I'm not super inspired, but most days it really is. I wake up and I have an idea and I write it down, and then it becomes an article or it becomes a training topic or something like that later. But if you don't do it every day and you don't have a specific purpose that you're writing toward, it's going to take you a long time to get anywhere. And you're probably not going to find it resonating with people as consistently if you have a purpose. And I can say, hey, this is Chad and this is what he's about. And when he writes it, he's researching it and he cares about it. So I want to interact with it. And I think the last piece is, and I actually just did I did a talk at my company earlier this week called Activating Your Professional Identity. And a big part of it is, where do I begin? And a lot of people are not comfortable just writing and sharing day one. So I say curate, find great articles that inspire you, share them, and then put your thoughts on top of it and interact with those people, or put a couple of different ideas together and challenge people. You don't have to create it all yourself, especially when you're just getting started. Just establish your brand saying, these are the types of things I'm reading. These are the types of things I react to. Share your ideas, get other people to share their ideas. And then suddenly you're going to find you're going to create content off the back of that over time.
That's amazing. I was feeling bad for myself because that's about a book a week. I have a long ways to catch up to you. So that's amazing that you continue putting in knowledge in one end and distributing that out to the broader community. So we appreciate you putting out such great content to the community. So last question I have for you, and this is actually more of a practitioner question. So you're at Hearsay now. You're enabling, if a lot of people don't know, Hearsay does very large enterprise deals with large enterprise or long enterprise sales cycles. So give us your tips for the community members who have to enable similar kind of enterprise focused sales teams. How are you viewing the world of enablement for making that type of team the most productive they can be?
Absolutely. My approach is all about the team. So when you're in a long sales cycle and you're working with, you know, C-level executives at giant companies, it's going to be a multi-threaded deal. It's not going to be one AE that makes one relationship and then we just, you know, we sit through a ton of meetings for 2 years and then we sign a document. There's going to be a ton of people involved. There's going to be an executive sponsor on our side. There's going to be, you know, the sales professional that's going in the door. And then there's going to be all of our other people, the solutions team, implementation team, engagement managers, customer success. There's a ton of different people that are going to be working through this deal cycle. And the challenge in something that's that long and that involved is really making sure that all the plays are organized across the entire account team. Because it's really easy for every one of those groups to have their own plays, their own KPIs, and figure out what they're going to be doing. The challenge is, what's the one playbook that includes them all? What's the one certification where they're all saying the same language, understand how to position the products in the same way? What's the what are the pop-up trainings that I'm doing quickly that gives them the elevator pitch that's consistent across all of them that are talking to a myriad of people in all these different accounts? So my approach right now is thinking about all the classical enablement responsibilities just through the lens of the account team. So what's the content that everyone needs to serve up at the right time? How is it moving the deal forward? What types of training and onboarding do we need for new people on those teams so that they become great team players and great partners? What are the soft skills you need in order to be a great communicator? Because when you're working on a team of people that's in a deal cycle that's long, that's working with that many other contacts inside, a communication strategy is critical. It's not just I'm doing the job you're telling me to do, but I'm communicating that job to the right people at the right time so they know what the next step is. So for me, it's really taking all the enablement function and just plug it into an account team philosophy. And I own sales operations and enablement here, so I'm having to use both sides of my brain because I'm also having to produce the data, the activity metrics, understanding how we're going to forecast in a 2-year deal cycle, what that looks like, and what happens when you miss it by a month and suddenly that multi-million-dollar deal falls in a quarter after you were expecting it. It's a game changer. It's a game changer for the way that we look at how our business is going to run, how we staff, all the different pieces of it. So I think for enterprise, that's a great tactic. I think there are other things that you can do in the future, but as far as classical enablement and enabling an enterprise process, you really have to be inclusive of everyone that's going to be on the deal team and talking to the customers to create a consistent buyer's experience through the buying journey.
Those are great tips, almost an Amazon-like approach to enablement. And I love the go-to-market alignment across multiple stakeholders and making sure all kind of centers around the customer's buying process. So great tips. It seems like the higher you go, the more you have to be aligned. So Chad, hey, thanks so much for coming on and imparting your wisdom to the crowds. It was so awesome doing the pre-interview with you and then doing this interview. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. So glad you invited me.